Hi guys, welcome to Simple Programming. In this video, let us look at how to use Zuul server as an API gateway for a microservice cluster. Zuul is like a front door to your service instances. All requests flows through Zuul and then goes to the services. Zuul can be used as an authentication, monitoring, routing, filtering, and load balancing component. There is an important thing that you need to understand before you go and write a code. So you need to understand what is a Zuul filter. Zuul filter is a class that provides you different methods for filtering the request. So let us take a look at the different filtering mechanisms Zuul has. Zuul totally has 4 filters inbuilt in it. That is a pre-filter, a post-filter, a route filter, and an error filter. Of course, you can have your custom filter also. So when a request comes to your gateway, it first hits the pre-filter, then the route filter, then the post filter. But the error filter is something that always runs at the background, and if there's any errors in this particular filtering mechanisms, it will immediately catch. So you can use it as a an exception handler or an error mechanism where you can return a valid exception or error through a valid response. Okay, so this Zuul filter has 4 important methods in it. One is to set the type, the other is to set the execution order, then whether you should really use the Zuul filter or not, whether it's enabled or not. Then there is a run method. The run method is where your logic about filtering is going to go into. Alright, let's go into the Spring Boot application and let's try to build the Zuul filter now. Alright guys, let's create a Zuul application. For this, you can create a Zuul application by Spring Starter project, give a name and search for Zuul. You need to add the Zuul dependency to your pom.xml, and that's it. Click on finish and it should get generated. So I already have my Zuul server configured here. Let me quickly open up my pom.xml. My pom.xml has the web starter in it. It has the Netflix Zuul dependency. It has an open fain dependency in it. It has a Eureka client dependency in it, and the test dependency. I'll come back to this open fain in the middle of this video. I have an excellent example for this Zuul. When we go through that, I'll tell you what this fain does. Okay. Then what I have for this example is I created 2 services here. One is the admission service and the other is a log service. The admission service, let's quickly take a look at the pom.xml. It has an actuator. It's going to serve as a Eureka client. It has Hystrix dependencies. It has dependency with the config server, and I have also added the Spring Cassandra dependencies here. Let me go to the controller. The admission controller is going to accept a post mapping with a request body of admission, and it's going to save it to our Cassandra repository. Pretty straightforward, microservice. And similarly, I have a log service here. Pretty straightforward. The log service is going to accept a log object as a post mapping, and it's going to directly save it to our Cassandra database. The only difference between these 2 microservices is the key space is going to be different. If we look at the configuration, right, I have added a new folder, admission service. Inside admission service, I have an application.yaml. The key space name of this data is going to be admission service, and the key space name for the log service is going to be log_service. So the data is going to be stored in 2 different key spaces. Okay, so that's our setup. Let's go to our Zuul server and take a look at our filters. Okay, for this example, right, I created 3 filters. So one is a pre-filter. So like I mentioned earlier, you need to extend the Zuul filter, and you should override these 4 methods in it, like the should filter, the run method, the filter type, and the filter order. So by default, the should filter will be false. You have to change it to filter. The filter type will be it will be null. Change it to pre-type, and the filter order, it will be 0. Give it to pre-decoration filter order. I'll show you in the middle of my example what is the use of this filter constants, because you don't have to directly hard code these values here. You can make it look more elegant by using this filter constants available in the Zuul. Then let's go to the error filter, which is going to execute in the background. So the same thing, like I have extended it with the Zuul filter. The should filter is there. There's a run method. The filter type is error filter, and there is a send error filter, order -1. Again, I have a post filter here. The post filter has extended the Zuul filter. It has the same, it has the same methods here. I have added a new implementation here. I'll come back to this later. Let us quickly take a look at our application.yaml. So in our application.yaml, I have named my Zuul server here, and I have a few keys here. So if you look at this keys, right, Zuul.ignore services. What does this key does? So the thing is, like, you can't allow every application or instance to directly register with Zuul. Okay, in order to stop that, right, you have to give ignore services. That is, ignore everything and only map to this route whatever I mentioned in my application.yaml. So the only routes that I mentioned is /student and /admission. Only these will get routed, not everything else. So you need to definitely mention this for better handling of the Zuul filterings. And then I have the routes mentioned here. You need to mention your application name. Your application name is going to serve as a service ID. The service ID will be used by the Feign and by Zuul in a lot of different ways. Okay, you mentioned the path where the route has to be mapped from the Zuul filter, and you also need to mention the service ID, and you also may have to strip the prefixes. Strip prefix is nothing. Before I move on to the strip prefix, let me quickly show you. You can add prefixes here. Let's say your application starts with let's say it's a school. Okay. For example, let's say your API is school API. So you'll be adding this to all your microservices, right? So you can remove this and add this directly here. So that's one way of adding the prefix. So then by default, right, these prefixes will be stripped from the request. So I don't want that to happen. So I want my prefixes to stay as it. So I'm going to make it false. So like I mentioned earlier, right, Zuul can be used in a number of ways. Like you can use it for authentication, you can use it for filtering, you can use it for for multiple things. So for load balancing, all the stuff. So how load balancing happens in Zuul is like it uses the ribbon. Ribbon is already enabled by default. It uses the zone, our load balancer of the internal Zuul to load balance the cluster. It load balances the cluster through round robin fashion. And if you don't want, and if you want to use your own custom logic, right, you can definitely do it. You can also customize your the round robin pattern, or you can customize the load balancer yourself. So in this example, what I did is like I have added few implementations in the post filter. So what's going to happen is like I'm going to capture all my request responses into a log table. So the log service is going to do the job. So whatever request that comes into the Zuul, right, it's going to be captured and it is going to be saved in the log service. I can do that in the pre-filter, but in the pre-filter, there's something that is invoked before the request goes to the instance. When the response comes back from the instance, pre-filter will not be invoked. So I'll not have the response. So the best place to put this logic is in the post filter, because post filter will be invoked when the response comes back, so that I can get the request and the response from the request context and save it to my database. That's the implementation that I have done in my in the Zuul application. Let's quickly take a look at that. So the request context is one of the important constructs in Zuul. So this is going to contain all the important informations about your incoming requests and responses. Whatever information you want, you can get it from here. Even the error throwables, the request response, the timestamps, the headers, everything can be obtained from here. So all you have to do is like you have to request.get current context, and you will have this information. So here, right, so you could see here like I'm creating a new HTTP servlet request with the request I got from the request context. I'm getting the input stream and I'm converting it to a string, and then I'm getting the response data stream and converting into a response body, and then creating a log object. This log is nothing but my own model object. So I'm setting all this information here with a create time stamp. and then I'm calling the log service to record my Zuul interactions. Okay, so the thing is like in a regular case, right? You would be doing a REST template call to call another microservice and pass on an information, right? So this is where Feign comes in. Feign, simplifies your way of, you know, interacting with another web service much easier. Feign is a declarative web service client. So to use Feign, right, you have to create an interface and annotate it with the service ID of the service of the microservice that you're going to integrate it. Let me quickly show you the interface. So here is the interface that I created. It is so simple. You don't have to worry about constructing your URI components. Doing an exchange, getting it, writing multiple try catches. Inspecting getting the response body. There are a lot of things that you do with the REST template, right? It's super cool and it's very easier when you do it through Feign, because every service or every instances is registered to the Eureka server. So it will be easy to easily identify an instance or easily identify a service through Feign client. So they have made it very simple. So I created a service here. I'm sorry, I created an interface here, a log service which has been annotated with at the rate of Feign client. The ID is going to be the service ID that I mentioned in my application.yaml of the Zuul server, and it's also going to be the same application name. Okay, just make sure that it is same, or else there'll be some issues. Then I created a method signature and I have annotated it with post mapping. The value is going to be /log, and I'm going to pass in a request body log. So it is like making an internal call between the same project. So it's super cool and super easy. So let's jump on to the post man and try to send a request through the Zuul to the admission service, and let's see whether the request gets saved in the admission underscore service key space, and as well as the log underscore service key space. Because when a request comes into Zuul, it is going to go to the admission service. It's going to process, and when it comes back, it's going to save that log information, that is your request and response, along with the timestamp in the database. Let's see whether this thing happens or not. Okay, so for this, what I have is like I've already started the server. Let me quickly jump on to Postman. Okay, so here's the request I have for the admission service. I have an admission ID, school name, the student object in it, as well as the address object which is inside the student object. Okay, so let me try to click on send, and let's see what is the response we get. All right, looks like we have got the response back, and the status is 200. But let us go and take a look at our Cassandra database to double check and confirm that this request has been saved in the admission service key space as well as the log service key space. All right, let me open up the console. All right, so here's my the admission table in the admission service key space. You could see here the request that we sent was for Steve Rogers. We sent a request for Steve Rogers, and I could see that the request has successfully got saved in the application in the admission service. Now let us take a look at our log service to understand whether our post filter of the Zuul worked correctly or not. All right, so here's the log table of the log service. Let me see whether I could see the, okay, all right. So we have the, the data saved here. So you could see here, right? The request and the response has been successfully saved in the audit log table. So that's cool. So our Zuul is working fine. And now let's do one thing. I want to show you what is the importance of filter constants, and let me debug the application and let me show you how the flow goes in from each filter. Okay, so I'm going to debug now, and I'm going to show you how the flow goes through the Zuul filters For this, what I did is like I started the Zuul server in the debug mode, and I also placed a debug point on all the three filters. Let me double check that once. So I have debug points on all the run methods of the three filters. Now let's go to Postman. Let's fire a request. Alright, so the request has come to the pre-filter. So this is our pre-filter. You could see here the filter type is pre, and it has come to our pre-filter. So now you can do whatever you want before the request actually goes to a service. Few examples would be like you want to authenticate the request before it goes to a service. You want to check the request headers, whether they have sent a valid request headers or not. You want to do other implementations like generating a correlation ID or generating a request ID here or generating some ID that will be used by the downstream services. You can do all these stuffs in the pre-filter. Let me skip this loop. Alright, so now the request has been processed, and when it has come back to Zuul, right, it has hit the post filter. So we are here at the post filter of the Zuul. Now the request has come back, and it has come back to the post filter. So this is like after processing the request in the service. If there is something that you want to do in your application, like cleaning up some tables, or you want to save a log information, or you want to save an audit log information, those are things that you can do here. Okay, so let me click on resume, and we didn't go to the error filter because there is no error in the application. Now I'm going to simulate an error. Let me do one thing. Let me go to Postman, and alright guys, I totally forgot one thing here. So when using Zuul, right, and I mentioned that your request will be going through Zuul. So you could see here that I'm using the Zuul's URI to access the student or the admission service. I'm not using the direct URI of the admission. That is, admission is running in port 8001. Our Zuul is running in port 5001. So I'm using the Zuul URI to directly go to admission service. I'm not directly using the 8001 port. Okay, I'm really sorry, I completely missed that out. Alright, so now I'm going to simulate an error scenario. In our application.yaml, we have the student service here, but we don't have the student service started here. So now Zuul is going to throw an error. Alright, let me click a send. Okay, so the request has come to the pre-filter, and then you could see here it immediately went to the error filter. So this request context actually has a get throwable. You can just inspect this get throwable, and you can get the exception and return back an elegant response to the end user instead of sending the default exception message. You don't have to do much coding in order to capture an error and send back it. It already has an error filter in it. Before we finish this video, let us take a look at the filter constants and the ordering mechanism of Zuul. I'm going to click on send now into pre-filter. Alright, I'm here at the post filter. Let me enlarge the console a little bit, and let me try to go by line. So the filter constant send response filter order is 1000. Alright, the forward filter order is 500. The error filter order is 0. The pre-decoration filter order is 5. So now do you see the hierarchy here? Like the error filter is 0, the pre-filter is 5, the post filter is 1000. So if you try to do a -1 here, right, your the custom filter, that logic that you have written, will get a priority before the actual filter. So you can easily configure this in a better way, and you can use this according to the needs that you want this mechanism to execute. So this is the importance of filter constants. There's a lot of constants inside this filter constants file. You can take a look at this. There's only one advice, like don't hard code the values inside the filter order, filter types, and try to use this in a better way. Alright guys, with this we come to the end of the Zuul video. I tried my best to time box whatever information I can share in this video. If there's any questions or doubts, right, please definitely write to me. I'll be happy to help you with that. In our next video, we are going to see what is Spring Boot Admin Server. Thank you.